and welcome. It's another Confessions podcast. Thank you for downloading another fabulous few minutes where you're going to get some more embarrassingly terrible tales from the incredibly sinful Radio 2 listener, all needing your forgiveness. This week's concise collection features a conniving chorister, a hair-raising horror movie hoax, the ruin of a rising radio jock, and a comical cornflake confusion. Here it all comes. Tonight's from Tony. Thank you, Tony. Oh, we have a full collective. Deadly's in.
I'm sitting quietly today. I thought I'd be quiet today.
Not much point you being here then.
All right. Okay, I'll stop doing that.
So this is from Tony. Thank you very much indeed, Tony, for sending in tonight's tale, dear Father Simon, and the Forgiving Collective. This has been bothering me for some time. I'm not entirely proud of my actions.
Oh.
At the tender age of 12, I was asked by a school friend if I'd like to join the local church choir. Now, I couldn't sing. I knew that, but the fringe benefits seemed pretty attractive. You got paid for each service.
Ooh.
What's more, you got paid an extra 5 shillings, which is 25p for
five bob
yep. For a wedding. An extra 5 shillings for a wedding, and there was a social club before choir practice on a Friday evening. Best of all,
go on.
Was the free use of one of the college swimming pools. Okay, after a couple of weeks,
seems to be a lot of springs. Fabulous benefits to me.
It is. This is a pretty good church choir, isn't it?
Let's join it.
Yeah, after a couple, I don't think you'd be allowed.
Oh.
After a couple of weeks, I soon realised that this wasn't for me, and no amount of freebies and money could make this drudgery worthwhile. It was mind-numbingly tedious, and the concentration to get the miming in time was really hard work.
I used to do that with the recorder. Yes, go on.
However, something was happening to my hormones. There was this drop-dead gorgeous alto student called Tracy. Whilst miming my way through practically every song and psalm I could, by strategically positioning myself in the correct choir stall, I could just stare at her without her knowing. I was absolutely smitten. I sat through the most mind-numbingly boring sermon after mind-numbingly boring sermon, and my fellow choristers weren't exactly fun, but they came for some very serious families. Whatever they are. Still, in the course of true love, it had to be worth it, and I hung on in there for Tracy.
Oh.
And I ironed my cassock with extra vigour. It's not a euphemism.
It sounds like one.
It's not. It's just what you have to do. If you're in the choir, you just have to make sure
you
look immaculate.
Well,
that's the way it goes. I was easily the most useless, tuneless choir boy there, but from time to time, there was a hymn I really liked.
Oh, yeah.
And I tried to sing it. Stop it, Deadly.
Everyone's lost it in this studio.
Don't just blame me. Don't just blame me. Matt, come back.
All right, Matthew.
Yes, I'm perfectly fine. How's your cassock?
From time to time, there was a hymn I really liked. I tried to sing, but it all came out like a sort of a growl, and I could see people looking around to see where the dreadful noise was coming from, so I went back to miming. At some point, the choir master decided to introduce a monthly medal for the best choir boy. It was a rather nice silver pendant on a blue braided ribbon, quite fetching really, and of course all the congregation, and perhaps Tracy, would think that the wearer was something special. To win it, there was a variety of general knowledge, religious and musical tests and questions, all scoring 1 point, and any of the clergy or the choir master could ask the questions at any time. The score sheet was pinned up in the vestry with all our names, and the running score was there for all to see. I sort of managed a few of the general knowledge questions, remembered who wrote Acts of the Apostles, remembered who planned what with Bathsheba, that kind of thing. But as you can imagine, it all fell down around the whole music area, what with it being a choir and everything. The opportunity seemed too good to miss, and armed with a pencil, I started adding in a few ticks here and there. When no one was looking, I added another tick. Before anyone got in, I added another tick. After everyone had left, I added another tick. I got away with it because, despite the grumblings, there were too many adults authorised to award marks for my fraud to be identified. After one extraordinary day when I scored 20 points for punctuality, Bible knowledge and knowing who the Chancellor of the Exchequer was, I forget why, I actually won the medal. Some of my peers were unsporting enough to criticise the result publicly, but as we're in the house of God, it seemed strange and wrong to accuse anyone outright of cheating, so I was awarded the medal. It was beautiful, Father Simon, shiny, embossed with a singing lark, and was strung with the beautiful ribbon. I wore it like a rapper wears his medallion. I swung it whenever Tracy came near.
You're living this, aren't you?
I reflected its shine on her face during Psalm 23, which she seemed to find a little annoying.
Oh, dear. I bet.
like a laser. I played with it as she walked past, and I could tell she was impressed. At some point, Tracy said, "Well done." And that smile, that was my obsequious voice. Right? I can still see
Well
it
done.
now.
Do it again. Can you do that voice again?
Well
No.
done.
Well done.
She took me to the belfry, and she took me to the belfry.
What? Ridiculous. Has this been
How am I supposed to give a straight face through this? This is unbelievable.
No, she's fine. Listen, she took me to the belfry and talked knowingly of descants, harmony, and other matters I didn't understand. I saw the light go out of her eyes as she realised I was no good for her, and that was that. I don't suppose she ever really knew my name, or whether she noticed the way I managed to twist one leg around whilst the other was vertical when I was in her presence, or the amount of dribble that came out of my mouth. I knew what I had done was wrong, but I didn't care. I knew I was in love, and it was all worth it. Looking back now, our little mini-date was based on a fraud. I do have regrets and would like to beg forgiveness. Plus, I couldn't sing, which is another fraud altogether. Anyway, it's Tony. Tony Soprano, I suppose. You'd say. What?
There was something slightly odd about that confession.
You've got your head girl.
No.
face on.
I think, obviously, Tony was not entering into the spirit of things. As he said, they were in the house of God, and he was miming, he was cheating, he was being paid for doing nothing. So I have no sympathy for him at all. So
But-
you're not forgiven.
She was beautiful.
Yeah, I thought it was a good try. It's a good try, wasn't it? He wanted to woo her with his medal. Show us your medal. Go on.
You
that
would,
sort of thing.
but you would. You'd say, "Look, I'm the best. I'm the best."
I think it all went wrong. I think it all went wrong in the vestry, though, by the sound of it, didn't it?
You think?
That went a bit wonky. But no, I think forgiven. I think forgiven. A good try, but it didn't quite carry it off the end bit. It all fizzled out towards the end, I thought. But forgiven. Tracy sussed you in the end. No harm done.
What do you mean it all fizzled out at the end?
I'm going into no detail.
What did you want to happen there?
I wanted lots to happen. It sounded really good. And then the end,
I reckon there could be some choral confessions, which I look forward to receiving. Confessions at bbc.co.uk. Brother Matthew.
Yeah, that confession shows that the spirit of Janet and John lives on, doesn't it, on drive time?
You
Well
think?
done, everyone. Yes, I am definitely going to forgive. If you're gonna cheat, then go all out for it. Obviously kids don't cheat, but if you are going to cheat, just go for it and absolutely put as many ticks next to your name as you can. Well done. I'm definitely forgiven.
Oh, excellent.
Yes,
We've agreed.
Very good. Unanimity here, but do you forgive Tony? Yes or no?
No.
Oh, no, sorry.
No. Apparently not.
Oh, no.
House of God and all that.
Yeah. Here's today's tale then, and it comes from Dr. T. Thank you very much indeed, Dr. T, dear Father May, and the Honourable Holy Trinity of Insubordination. My confession dates all the way back to the 1990s when I was a fun-loving 18-year-old medical student, which is always an ominous start to anything that comes from medical students is always particularly hazardous. Anyway, this one got through. By the way, before we go any further, can I say, if you're sending in a confession, I read through a whole bunch in the last few days, if your confession involves something that involves, shall we say, an illegal act, it ain't going to get on. That's it. I've had so much illegality coming through via email.
Do we get to read those as well, though? Because
I can forward them. I can forward them to you.
Very good. Put them in the fridge.
So we have a confession fridge and we can snack on them collectively.
Yeah, let's do that.
I was a fun-loving 18-year-old medical student at university that is best left nameless. Although I was in university to study medicine, this incident has nothing per se to do with my choice of future career. I was residing on the second floor of halls of residence at the time. Typical low-grade student digs, non-flashy, non-posh, but it did the job. We spent the evenings in each other's rooms watching analogue television with its miserable 5 channels. Imagine that. Generally mucking about having harmless fun as 18-year-old students are prone to do.
Okay.
We all got on very well, enjoying each other's company. Friends were made here that have lasted 20 years. One of our friends on the corridor was Peter. He was here to study medicine too, but was very new to this student life idea, having been used to years of hard work studying for his GCSEs and A-levels. None of that going on here. Peter was also into amateur radio, having worked in his local hospital radio prior to coming down to study. He had his own little mixer in his room.
Was it
How
you?
fantastic.
With headphones,
It was you.
microphones and mini-disc
He's gone
players.
red, he's gone red.
It's not me.
It is you, come on.
In the 90s, excuse me, you're at least a couple of decades out. He had mini-disc players, if anyone remembers them.
Oh, I love them.
We thought all this equipment was so cool. Well, it was 20 years ago, when none of us had mobile phones or internet access and Facebook hadn't actually been invented. We used to spend many a happy evening mucking about, creating mayhem, recording shows on those old cassette decks that we had. With a mixture of funny interviews, we interviewed each other, songs played on CDs, karaoke attempts and other tomfoolery. This sounds hilarious, doesn't it?
The hours flew by.
Things got even more exciting when Peter's brother created a little transmitter as part of his electronics project. Well, it was able to broadcast to a radius of 500 metres. Now, not a huge distance is granted, but just sufficient to broadcast to all of the rooms in our hall of residence, which we thought was the coolest thing to happen on our floor for many a long week. He used to broadcast his radio shows through this transmitter, which we used as a surrogate alarm clock to wake us all up at 7 o'clock to go down for breakfast. One normal Wednesday night, Peter was running another show. This time he was on in the evening. He was just on the whole time. It was full of music and fun and quizzes, and we hung around in his room as usual, messing about. Suddenly, 3 very loud bangs came on the door of the room. "Open the door now!" That was my...
You're nicked.
My Rozzers voice.
Sweeney.
"Open the door!" came a very authoritative voice, and booming as well, which continued, "We are the security officers from the Radio Academy."
Contradiction in terms.
There. Yeah.
Yep. Oxymoron.
Very scary.
Yes.
Peter's face was a picture. Rabbit caught in the headlights spring to mind. He clearly thought his collar was about to be felt. And then he picked up his mixer, the leads, and the transmitter.
Oh, no.
In the box under his desk. The box which also housed his prized plastic full-body skeleton, Idris. Remember, he's a big box and he's a medical student.
Right,
Yes,
of course.
okay.
Sadly, Peter decided that hiding the equipment with Idris was insufficient to prevent him having 20 years in chokey. For crimes presumably against the Broadcast and Telecommunications Act of 1965. He was convinced that he had to get rid of all the equipment. And instantly, with these officers outside the door, he picked up the box, and before we had time to react, he flung the whole contents out of the bedroom window, and within 2 seconds, the whole of his radio studio was shattered on the concrete floor outside, scattered amongst Idris's collarbone, fingers, ribs, and shattered skull bones. We looked on in horror, because it had, of course, been our idea of a joke. We had arranged for a friend to pretend to be the Radio Academy guy. We didn't think he'd fall for it. When Peter opened the door, no one was there, and Peter's puzzled look turned to anger as he became convinced, quite rightly, that he'd been the victim of a horrible practical joke. And now not only was his radio DJ career over, but Idris had also died for the second time, so to speak. Now, we could have confessed our sins to him there and then, but the look of anger on his face had us so worried that we confessed to nothing. Instead, we took the mock sympathetic approach. "Oh, I know," and told him that we'd find out who had done this horrible prank. Not funny at all.
Just do that sympathetic thing again.
"Oh, I know." Oddly enough, the perpetrator was never found. Well, here's the moment.
Go on.
We need to seek forgiveness from Peter, who's now a consultant orthopaedic surgeon, you might like to know, for not confessing that it was us, his mates, all along, his loyal sidekicks at the radio studio that had ruined his radio career. And as far as I know, he never returned to the radio after that evening, having had the shock of the radio equivalent of Old Bill outside his door. The other bit of the confession which you just mentioned is that the Radio Academy probably don't have security guys who go around and visit you in the small hours. I also need to ask forgiveness from all the students residing on the floor below us who might have seen Idris's bits and pieces flying down from our floor and seeing a collection of fingers, ribs and skull bones on the floor by their rooms, wondering what on earth was happening and if CSI had started a few years before it had even been conceived. No, it hadn't. It was just us with
I'm sure they weren't wondering that.
with another hilarious medical skeleton joke. Anyway, medical students, you just can't stop them. It's one non-big laugh all the way through.
Yeah, that phrase, fun-loving medical student, made my
Yes.
heart sink right at the offset of that confession. But I have to say, I thought it was quite a funny prank.
It was.
And I also have to say that anyone who keeps a skeleton under their bed, medical student or not, does not have my sympathy. Sorry, just can't
not got
stand that
one?
kind of thing.
Have you not got one yourself?
No, not literally. I have many skeletons in the
should they
cupboard,
keep
but
it
not
then?
under the bed.
Nothing in the fridge?
Well, why do you have to have a skeleton anyway?
Because you're a medical student, you've got to have your...
wasn't it just a joke
You've got to
skeleton?
refer to it. You have to refer to it at a moment's
You've got to know
notice.
where the bones are.
Yeah, let me just check where the
I thought it was
tarsals
like,
are.
look at my joke skeleton under the bed, because I'm a medical student and I like a laugh. Okay, in that case, he had to have it, did he?
Yes.
Okay, in that case, I'm not forgiving, because it was really mean.
You're easily won over.
Yes. Easily persuaded.
Skeleton confessions, medical student confessions, local radio and student radio confessions. Yes, deadly.
A budding career cut short there.
Yeah.
I would have thought.
Well, he's now a consultant orthopaedic surgeon, so
yeah,
he's
raking it
more
in.
good.
Yes, and raking it in.
And raking it in.
And raking it in. Because I was going to say, they could have bought him new kit if they'd been very honest about it, and he could have carried on broadcasting. But he's a consultant orthopaedic surgeon, so, you know, he can make up for it now, can't he? Buy his own. He could buy the BBC, to be honest. So I don't think I'm going to forgive, really. And there was no need, actually, to throw the skeleton out. He could have just thrown the radio kit out.
If he's an orthopaedic surgeon, you could presumably piece the skeleton back together.
Yeah, easily.
That's what he does.
With a bit of glue.
Brother Matthew.
Peter strikes me as a particularly highly strung individual, which ironically would have given him an excellent future in radio, because frankly that's where they all work. So I am going
As opposed to you, who doesn't.
No, exactly.
Dabbling,
So
you're
I am
dabbling.
going to
Come on.
forgive,
Oh.
because it's only a prank and he clearly
You hate
reacted.
pranks?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, actually that's right. I do hate pranks. I'm not going to forgive.
You're so easily won over.
Yes, I am. Yeah.
What a bunch of
What a
flimsies.
shambles
Yes.
tonight.
Yeah,
what a
very
shambles.
We welcome newcomer Ross Noble.
Hello.
Hello, Ross. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks.
Into the Confessional Collective. And you're our guest after 6 o'clock. But
Yeah.
we just thought you might be interested in this story.
Right.
So we just invited you in just a few minutes early, if that's okay.
It's more than okay. I'm excited.
I've got a little story here, and then you just have to say whether you forgive the person
Right.
or not, as the case
Okay.
may be. And Matt, Rebecca, just do their thing, as per normal.
Do our thing.
Pardon?
We just do our thing.
Yeah, just do your thing.
Yeah,
Is that okay?
that's fine.
If you could do your thing in your jodhpurs. And
You didn't have a mic up there, did you?
Well, these things are controlled elsewhere for the moment.
Oh, is that right?
But in a couple of weeks, it'll all be down to me. All the good stuff and all the bad stuff will all be my fault.
Okay.
That's the way it goes. But it's fine. I'm over it.
Good.
Who's doing that then?
Who's doing what?
Who's doing the mics?
Well, I've got some microphones here at the moment, but Gary, the studio manager,
Oh,
love him while he's here.
oh, what that guy there that's just got really red.
Yeah.
Okay,
That's
sorry.
him. He's very,
sorry.
He's very proud of the sound balance.
Okay.
Fine, anyway, so here we go. Dear Father Simon and the very Reverend Confessions team, this is from Barry. Thank you, Barry. I'd like to ask forgiveness for something I put one of my best friends through some years ago, and have until now found amusing at his expense, but feel now it's time I confessed my sin. These events took place in October 1994 when I lived in a flat in Coventry. Having recently split up from my girlfriend, I needed a lodger to help pay the bills and generally relieve the boredom of nights in. I could see why the girlfriend got rid of him. I was 23 at the time, and with men behaving badly irregular on television, I thought that after the relationship disaster, I deserved a bit of lad's time. I was introduced through a friend to a guy called Jim, but we called him Cockney. Because on account of him originating from Ilford, but he spoke as though he was a regular in EastEnders. Cockney and I quickly became good friends, and we'd often go out together, keen to try, but not always succeed in chatting up the local women. On one occasion, we managed to convince two very nice girls, Helen and Amanda, to come back to our flat. Being gentlemen, however, and not wanting to come across as too pushy, we decided we'd all watch a film together. And what better way than to get in a bit of contact with the girls than to make it a horror movie, so that hopefully they'd be very, very scared and want us, to protect them from the dark, that kind of thing. What I didn't realise about Cockney was that he was absolutely petrified of all horror films and never watched any ever, on account that he would have nightmares for weeks on end. However, in the company of two attractive girls and his new flatmate, he was not willing to own up to his fears and sat with his eyes closed through most of it, hoping that it would all be worth it in the end. This might have been a good strategy if it wasn't for the fact that I chose The Omen as the film to watch, and little did Cockney realise that one of the scariest bits of the film is the opening credits with the slow Latin chant and the very eerie piano music, which coincidentally is like this. Now that's scary. Scary, Ross?
Yeah.
Very scary.
And not far off The Apprentice.
That's right. That's what everyone thought it was, just which is also scary.
Yes.
Needless to say, with the Antichrist, some would say. Needless to say...
hello.
What?
Good. Yeah, no, carry on.
In The Omen.
Oh, in The Omen, of course. Yeah, that's what I thought you meant as well.
Yeah. Needless to say, we watched the film with the girls who clung on to us when there was anything scary, and all in all, it was a good night. Cockney, however, had nightmares for weeks to come. So terrified was he of what he had heard and what he had seen. About a month later, I was going on holiday with another friend, and Cockney's bravado about me being gone and what he could get up to in the flat while he was all on his own made me think I had to keep him in check just a little. As I was packing for the journey, I picked some cassettes to play on my Walkman and discovered one that I had bought a few years ago. It was the soundtrack to the film we'd watched with the girls, The Omen. The opening credits were the first track on the tape. And so on. So, giggling to myself, I put the tape in the stereo, set the volume to 11 on the dial, and set the timer to play it at midnight the night after I left. Well, Cockney was a bit of a technophobe, so I thought it was unlikely that he would use the stereo before then. I knew that my plan had had the desired effect when I was greeted for my return on holiday with a stream of swear words about my possessed stereo when I returned. Cockney had gone to bed early on a work night and was woken up abruptly by this. The Latin chanting blasting from the speakers. Petrified and half asleep, he sat in his bed motionless with fear and convinced the house was possessed. He couldn't remember what to do when faced with the Antichrist, so he screamed very loudly just to be on the safe side. Eventually, he realised it must be something to do with the stereo, and upon finding it, still scared, he tried to turn it off. He couldn't, however, switch it off using the power button on the remote or the unit itself, and was left with no alternative but to pull all of the nearby plugs from the wall in the hope of making it stop. This added the added effect of plunging the house into total darkness. Cue more screams. What he didn't realise is that he needed to press the timer button to switch it off, not the power button. This appeared to convince him that the Antichrist was indeed controlling the stereo, and he was so scared that he went and slept in the car for a few hours until he was cold and convinced that Lucifer had actually left the building. We never ever watched any horror films together again, and to this day, Cockney doesn't know if it was his faulty hi-fi, and I'm not sure if he still thinks that the devil was in his stereo, but I suspect he thinks it was, as he binned it very soon after. The devil did actually take his music cassette. In my middle years, I now realise how frightening it would have been for my good friend, and I asked forgiveness on the basis that he came to no physical harm, and he never liked horror films anyway, so I haven't really given him a fear that he didn't have in the first place. So, it's a story about the possession of a hi-fi, but actually it turned out to be just horrible old mate setting a little trick for Cockney based on 1990s technology. What do you think, Sister Rebecca?
Well, I'm totally with Cockney. I cannot stand horror films. I just don't get how anyone can go to a cinema or watch a DVD voluntarily and want to be scared. So I'm with his mate, and I really feel sorry for him. I mean, being woken up in the middle of the night is bad enough, let alone with that. And the fact that he couldn't... Yeah, exactly. That's how he could have got rid of him.
Yeah, Damien, you're fired.
I watched a movie called, I think it was My Little Eye, recently. Not recently, a few years ago, actually. And I was so scared that I couldn't sleep for days, and I just don't get it. So I think that was a really horrible thing to do to your friend Barry, and you're not forgiven.
Reverend Ross Noble.
I completely disagree. Completely disagree. I think that's brilliant. I think that he's done the right thing there. If it was me, I would have gone further. I would have had, the mysterious dog. I would have got a neighbour to dress up as the dog. I would have had him coming around. I would have had nannies knocking on the door. I would have had somebody dressed as an angel on the roof. The lot. Yeah, I think that's brilliant, and I love what he's done there, and he deserves not only does he deserve to be forgiven, he should be given some sort of special commendation,
a special award.
Yes.
Okay, and you love your horror movies anyway, which we'll talk about more after 6 o'clock, brother Matthew.
I love the fact that Cockney was sort of labouring under this idea that when the devil appears, he's going to want his own intro music. It must be yes. I'm not going on unless I get my own intro music with the theme from The Omen. Yes, absolutely. That. Yeah. I built myself up from nothing. So, yes, I'm going to forgive, just because of that.
This comes from Jeremy. Thank you, Jeremy.
Yeah, right. Sorry.
taken against him already.
Wow.
This owner and crew, my story dates back some 30... this actually contains a sentence, which, again, one of those sentences I've never read out ever in a confession. My story dates back some 30 years whilst on holiday in Menorca. My girlfriend and I had befriended another couple, and we'd actually run out of dares. We'd spend a lot of time doing dares, such as ask the waiter for a kiss, I lost, and do a dead ant in the middle of the outside restaurant. These kind of things provided hours of merriment. Eventually the subject turned to the experiences of the dining room at breakfast and the manager. This man had made it his mission to ensure that you arrived at your allotted time and your allotted time only, and you just took what he decided was a fair amount of bacon and eggs or bread from the self-service buffet. Return trips were frowned upon. He was generally very badly regarded by all guests and staff alike. The restaurant was tense with his hovering presence. How about that? Now, in those heady days of foreign travel, it was nearly impossible to buy foodstuffs in Spain that were the same as back home. This was also the age of far laxer weight restrictions on your luggage than is now the case. No pun intended. These two factors coupled together resulted in families stuffing their luggage with all sorts of British food. And by far the most common in our hotel was breakfast cereal. This was the thing that no one could do without, so it became a ritual. Each family's box of their favourite cereal would be numbered with a sticky ticket and removed to a safe place during the day. To reappear each breakfast time, families kept the same table throughout their stay, another rule enforced by our restaurant ruler. Now, whilst we were staying there, we noticed, while wandering past the vast restaurant, that the setting out of the breakfast cereal procedure took place just after the dinner, and things were cleared away. In other words, they were left out all night. Well, it was then that a plan was formed. It would involve a little bit of daring-do, a frisson of excitement, and last but by no means least, hopefully, we'd cause a little bit of trouble and embarrassment for our very mean manager. Myself and my new friend, whose name escapes me, would attempt to raid the restaurant and change all the inner contents of the cereal boxes around whilst leaving the stickered boxes where they should be. So it was that we sneaked in through the doors to the restaurant and made our way under table by table, hidden by large white tablecloths, to the middle of the room where our normal table was. Luckily, the kitchen staff were all too preoccupied with their duties and their foreign chattering and clattering. Yeah. That's what they do abroad.
Yeah, foreign chattering.
Oh,
that's Spanish. Oh, yeah.
It masked our giggles as we made our way to the scene of the crime. We devised a routine which involved removing the complete boxes from the tables a couple at a time, swapping the contents whilst under the table. This is radical stuff. The plan went well. Soon some 20 or so boxes had been sabotaged. We decided we'd had done enough mischief for the night and we would make our way to safety. By now, however, some staff had started laying out cutlery, effectively cutting off our chosen means of escape. No problem, the restaurant had a balcony that ran the full length of the room, which meant that we could sneak out of one door and re-enter at another close to the exit. As we slowly opened the door, whilst on all fours, we were greeted with a scenario that we couldn't have predicted. No one, in the interests of security, I suppose, had let it generally be known that the King of Spain would be spending some time at the hotel. And because of that, there was an armed guard on the balcony. 2 guards at each end of the balcony, each fully armed with machine guns at the ready, pointed at us. Well, they didn't expect an attack from behind, but what they didn't witness was probably the fastest hands and knees retreat in history by 2 now silent idiots. That's us. Either way, we were back in the restaurant. There now followed several tense moments as we made our way back... which you could just imagine, made our way back, planning our route according to the proximity of legs, both male and female, until we reached the safety of the hallway and were able to walk upright again. Next morning, fairly bright but early, for the first time ever, we were to be found sat at our breakfast table, awaiting the arrival of our nearby families. As anticipated, one by one, the cereals were poured. Frosties had become Cocoa Pops. Cornflakes had become Rice Krispies. A fight now started. In one dreadful moment, Weetabix had become Special K. Astonishment, puzzled looks, anger were found in equal measure. Families studied the contents of their neighbours' bowls. Accusations were made, and result, the manager was galled. The age-old tradition of communicating with foreigners by shouting was upheld. Doubts were raised over his managing skills. He looked furious. He looked embarrassed. This was exactly the humiliation we had hoped for. Even though we were not affected by the swap, but all around us were, our man was too busy reallocating cereals to realise who the culprits might be, even though the stifled giggling might have been a bit of a giveaway. So we need to apologise To the families concerned for the confusion and distress and the fights that ensued from the cereal swap, although they should have trusted the foreign food anyway. But particularly I'd like to apologise to the King of Spain, King Juan Carlos, in case we disrupted his breakfast routine. The manager, however, got what he deserved, and we don't regret that at all. So anyway, I don't think King Juan Carlos has been implicated. Well, he has, but not in any of the confessions that we've had. So we now turn keenly to Sister Rebecca to see what she makes of
I love a good
this.
slapstick confession. The idea of them crawling away from the...
Backwards, from the armed guard.
Yeah, through
yes.
the legs of the people in the restaurant.
I know,
Just
fantastic. A little bit Tom and Jerry, I
A little
thought.
bit Tom and Jerry. Also, the days of when people used to bring their breakfast cereal on holiday with them automatically. I think that...
Can you imagine having room in your bag for a big box of Special K / Rice
exactly.
Krispies?
They really were the days. I wonder where the
one of those variety packs, maybe.
Yeah.
Well, they're quite small, aren't they?
Okay.
But yeah, true. I wonder how bad the restaurant manager really was, because did he deserve to be shouted at by all those people? He was just doing his job, wasn't he? Hovering tensely or whatever. I just think that's not a crime.
The restaurant was tense with his hovering
presence, but he'd made sure people sat at the same table and got there on time, which seems fair enough to me. So even though I like a good joke, and I think it was a good joke to swap the cereals, I'm not going to forgive.
Now, what do you make of this then, Novice Nigel?
Well, I'm quite keen to know if King Juan Carlos had his own numbered breakfast cereal box as well.
I think he probably got a special...
He probably did a special K for
yes.
King. There you go. Boom, boom. Thank you. And
In Nigel's world, that counts as a joke.
He's very happy with that.
Very good. But Jeremy, really, it sounds like Tom Hanks from Big. You're there with their girlfriends, you and your mate, and you're doing pranks all the time. Really, I thought you might... A, it sounds like an appalling hotel, and B, but you might have had other things to get on with, and rather than just swapping breakfast cereal around.
Anyway, yes, moving on.
So I just think the whole thing, and foreign chattering. Really, learn some other languages. So I'm not forgiven on this.
Wow. Didn't expect that at the end.
I think I pulled a Muslim, hadn't I?
Yeah.
Brother Matthew.
I'm going to go along with Nige slightly on this, in that this seems an awful lot of effort to have someone say, ooh, I've got Cocoa Pops instead of Shreddies or whatever. I really don't... I'm never a big fan of pranks anyway, and the let's all do a dare, what's that about? No. In fact, this is the kind of couple I would avoid on holiday. Not a big fan. I am beginning to wish that Juan Carlos had been caught up in this and the armed guards had got involved. So I am not going to forgive.
What would they have had for a Spanish breakfast? What should they have had then?
They should have had, there's
meat and cheese, basically. Yes.
and a little bit of tortilla you'd have in the
and
morning.
some nice
Yeah.
coffee. By the way,
Special K.
And what?
And a Weetabix.
Special
Yes.
King. But what is it? Dead ant, by the way. Rebecca,
what
is
is
when
that?
you go back. You call dead ants and you go back onto your back and you
Arms
put
and
all
legs
your
in the air,
arms and
everyone
legs in
knows
the air.
that.
Normally happens
No.
in
You've never
lavatories
done
on
that?
rugby
No,
tours.
I
Someone
did the
shouts
dead
dead ants.
leg, but not the dead ant.
Oh, right, okay. That was
Zany time.
That was that crazy school you went to again.
Straight out of nightclub.
Well, having listened to another bunch of confessions, chances are it might have provoked a thought. It might have stirred something deep in your unconscious. Maybe you have something to confess to. I suspect more than one. confessions@bbc.co.uk is our email. Thank you very much. More in a week. And the Weekly Mayo available to download now and every Friday. Thank you so much.